You are in medieval France, in the year 1047 AD, living as a novice at the great Benedictine Abbey of Cluny. Your name is Brother Matthias, and tonight marks your first week since taking your preliminary vows. The cold stone floor presses against his bare feet as Brother Matthias startled awake, heart pounding. It was not the bell that woke him, a bell he had grown accustomed to in just 7 days, but rather the absence of it. The dormitory remained shrouded in darkness, silent except for the collective breathing of 24 monks. Through the narrow window, Matthias could see stars scattered across the night sky, suggesting it was still far from dawn. Yet something felt wrong. He had fallen asleep, clutching the small wooden cross his mother gave him before he left home, the only possession he had been permitted to keep. Now, as his fingers searched the rough woolen blanket, he realized, with rising panic, that it was gone. The dormitory smelled of beeswax candles, sweat, and the lingering scent of incense from evening prayers. Despite the spring season, the stone walls held onto winter's chill, making his thin blanket inadequate against the cold that seeped into his bones. "Brother," a whisper came from his right, so soft it might have been the wind. "Brother." Matthias turned to find Brother Adalbert, an elderly monk whose lined face seemed perpetually peaceful, even now in the darkness. "You have missed matins," Adalbert whispered, his voice like dry parchment. "Prior Augustine has noticed your absence." A wave of dread washed over Matthias. Missing the first prayer of the day, a prayer at 3 in the morning when even the roosters remained silent, was a serious infraction. Not once in his 20 years had Matthias slept so deeply, not even after days of harvesting in his father's fields. "But the bell, I did not hear it," Matthias protested weakly. Adalbert's eyes held no judgment, only a curious mixture of concern and amusement. There was no bell tonight. That was the test. Matthias whispered back, confusion mingling with his anxiety. "For the novices, Prior Augustine believes true devotion wakes without prompting." The old monk pressed something into Matthias's palm, the wooden cross, which had fallen beneath his cot. "Some of the brothers find his methods ... excessive, but he was appointed by Abbot Hugh himself." Prior Augustine had arrived at Cluny 3 months earlier, and stories of his strictness preceded him. Some said he had spent 10 years in complete silence, others that he had once stood in prayer for 3 days without food or rest. To the novices, he was a figure of both inspiration and terror. "What happens now?" Matthias asked, his throat dry with fear. "Go to the chapter house. The others who failed the test await you there." Adalbert's hand briefly touched Matthias's shoulder. "Remember why you came here, young brother." The question echoed in Matthias's mind as he hurriedly dressed in his rough woolen habit. Why had he come? Not entirely by choice. His father had arranged it after discovering his interest in learning to read, something no simple farmer's son should aspire to. Yet part of him had embraced the decision, drawn by the promise of knowledge contained in the Abbey's famous library. As Matthias slipped from the dormitory, the great Abbey of Cluny spread before him like a sleeping beast. Moonlight bathed the stone walls in silver, transforming the mundane into something mystical. For a moment, he stood transfixed by the beauty of it until a distant sound of chanting reminded him of his predicament. The chapter house door loomed before him, heavy oak weathered by centuries of use. Matthias hesitated, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the iron handle. Beyond this door awaited punishment and perhaps humiliation, yet also the continuation of the path he had chosen, or that had chosen him. He touched the wooden cross, now safely tucked into his habit, took a deep breath of the cold night air, and opened the door to face whatever consequences awaited. Inside, 5 other novices knelt on the stone floor, heads bowed. At the far end of the room, illuminated by a cluster of candles, sat Prior Augustine. His gaunt face showed no emotion as he observed Matthias's entrance, but his eyes, as a midnight lake, seemed to pierce straight through to Matthias's soul. "Brother Matthias," the prior said, his voice unexpectedly gentle, "we have been waiting. Close the door and join your brothers in contemplation. Your journey at Cluny begins anew tonight." The heavy door closed behind him with the finality of a tomb being sealed. Yet, as Matthias moved to kneel beside the other failed novices, he realized with startling clarity that he had never felt more alive. The chapter house remained silent as dawn approached, the 6 novices kneeling on the cold stone floor. Matthias's knees had long since gone numb, and his back ached with the effort of maintaining perfect posture. Yet he dared not move. Prior Augustine sat motionless before them, eyes closed in what appeared to be deep meditation, though Matthias suspected the prior missed nothing. The first pale light of morning filtered through the narrow windows when Augustine finally spoke. "You 6 have failed your first test," he said, his voice neither angry nor disappointed, but matter of fact. "The bell is a convenience, not a necessity. The truly devoted feel the call to prayer in their souls." Brother Matthias kept his eyes fixed on the floor, studying the worn stone beneath his knees. Generations of monks had knelt in this same spot, perhaps facing similar trials. The thought offered small comfort. However, Augustine continued, "Failure provides opportunity for growth. For 1 week, you 6 will observe complete silence. No words shall pass your lips except during prayer. You will communicate only through gestures and the language of hands that Brother Librarian will teach you this morning." Complete silence. The punishment struck Matthias as both merciful and severe. Though he spoke little by nature, the prospect of being unable to speak at all filled him with unexpected dread. "During this week of silence, you will assist Brother Thaddeus in the scriptorium. The work of copying manuscripts requires focus and precision qualities you must develop if you wish to remain at Cluny." Matthias felt a small surge of excitement despite his circumstances. The scriptorium, the beating heart of Cluny's intellectual life, was where the most precious books were copied and illuminated. Most novices spent years proving themselves worthy of such an assignment. "Rise now," Prior Augustine commanded. "Brother Jerome will escort you to Lord's your silence begins the moment you leave this room." As they stood on aching legs, Brother Adalmara Novice from the Northern Territories, with hair the color of straw-caught Matthias' eye, a look of understanding passed between them. This punishment might be a blessing in disguise. The morning air felt cool against Matthias's face as they followed Brother Jerome across the cloister. The sky had lightened to a delicate blue, with pink gold streaks announcing the sun's imminent arrival. Dew glistened on the central garden, and somewhere a bird sang its morning greeting. The beauty of the moment struck Matthias with unexpected force. If he had not missed matins, if he had not been kneeling in the chapter house all night, he would have missed this precise moment of perfect beauty. The thought stopped him mid-step. Brother Jerome turned, raising an eyebrow at Matthias' hesitation. Matthias quickly resumed walking, but his mind raced with the realization. Perhaps there was wisdom in Prior Augustine's methods after all. The abbey church rose before them, its stone facade softened by the morning light. Already, monks filed inside for Lauds, the second prayer of the day. As Matthias entered the sacred space, the familiar smell of incense and beeswax enveloped him. The vaulted ceiling soared overhead, and morning light filtered through simple glass windows, creating patterns on the stone floor. The 6 silent novices were directed to stand at the back, separate from the other monks, a visible reminder of their transgression. Yet, as the first notes of the morning chant filled the church, Matthias found himself strangely at peace. Their voices rose in unison, Latin words flowing like water. And for the first time since arriving at Cluny, Matthias felt truly part of something larger than himself. After Lauds came the chapter meeting, where the day's tasks were distributed. Prior Augustine announced the 6 novices' punishment to the assembled brothers, whose reactions ranged from sympathy to thinly veiled amusement. Brother Thaddeus, a rotund monk with ink-stained fingers who oversaw the scriptorium, looked particularly dismayed at the prospect of 6 mute assistants. "Very well," Thaddeus sighed. "I suppose silent novices are better than chattering ones. Come along then." The scriptorium occupied the upper floor of a building adjacent to the library. Unlike the cold stone of most abbey buildings, this room was relatively warm, with braziers strategically placed to keep the precious manuscripts safe from dampness. Tall windows allowed maximum light, and a dozen desks were arranged to capture it. Several monks already sat working, quills scratching softly against parchment. None looked up as Thaddeus led the novices inside. "Brother Librarian will teach." "Youth a hand language shortly," Thaddeus explained, leading them to a corner where 6 small desks awaited. "Until then, observe these." He placed before each novice a sheet of parchment covered with alphabets Roman, Greek, and strange symbols Matthias did not recognize. "Copy these exactly," Thaddeus instructed. "I care not about speed, only precision. One mistake means starting anew." As Matthias took up a quill, he noticed the other novices' expressions. Adelmar looked confident, while Brother Francis, a nobleman's son with soft hands, appeared horrified at the menial task. Brother Clement seemed resigned, Brother Peter anxious, and Brother Nicholas, the youngest among them, was already biting his lip in concentration. Matthias dipped his quill carefully in the inkpot and began to trace the first letter. The nib scratched against the parchment, leaving a slightly uneven line. Not perfect, but a beginning. Around him, the scriptorium hummed with quiet activity. Sunlight shifted across the floor as morning progressed. The silence that had seemed a punishment now felt like a gift, allowing complete focus on the simple act of creating one perfect letter after another. By the time the bell rang for toast, the 3rd prayer, Matthias had completed only half the alphabets, but each character was meticulously formed. Brother Thaddeus moved among them, inspecting their work with a critical eye. When he reached Matthias, he paused longer than with the others. He murmured, lifting the parchment to the light. "Slow but careful. Good. Some of your brothers should learn from your patience." The unexpected praise warmed Matthias more than the spring sun, now streaming through the windows. As they filed out for prayers, Adelmar nudged him slightly and nodded approval. Something had shifted. In silence, they were beginning to communicate more clearly than with words. Later, as they followed Brother Librarian's animated demonstration of hand signals, touching the ear meant listen, tapping the forehead meant understand, and dozens more complex gestures, Matthias realized that this week of silence might teach him more than years of speech ever could. The aroma of baking bread permeated the entire abbey a warm, yeasty scent that made Matthias's stomach growl in anticipation. 3 days into their week of silence, the 6 novices had been reassigned from the scriptorium to the kitchen. Rotation Prior Augustine had arranged to broaden their understanding of monastic responsibilities. Brother Celerarius, the Abbey's foodmaster, regarded the silent novices with undisguised suspicion. A tall man, with shoulders broadened by years of kneading dough, he ruled his domain with uncompromising standards. "I care not for your vow of silence," he announced after they arrived, flour already dusting his hands. "In my kitchen, precision matters more than penance. You may not speak, but you will learn." He assigned Matthias and Adelmar to bread making, an honor that was not lost on either of them. Bread was the foundation of every meal at Cluny, with each monk receiving a generous daily portion. Creating it perfectly was considered as important as copying manuscripts or singing prayers. "Watch," Celerius instructed, plunging his hands into a mound of dough. "Feel the life in it. Bread is not merely food, it is Christ's body, sustenance for both flesh and spirit." Matthias observed the Master's movements carefully. Rhythmic kneading, the practiced turn of the wrists. The way he knew exactly when the dough had reached the proper consistency. When Celerarius finally nodded for him to try, Matthias approached the task with the same concentration he had given to copying alphabets. The dough felt alive beneath his hands, a living thing responding to his touch. Too gentle, and it remained. Shapeless, too rough, and it became tough. Finding the balance required both strength and sensitivity, a revelation that struck Matthias as profoundly meaningful, though he could not have explained why. Across the kitchen, the other novices worked at various tasks. Brother Francis struggled to maintain a dignified expression while plucking chickens. Brother Clement sorted dried beans with methodical precision. Brothers Peter and Nicholas worked together, chopping vegetables, occasionally communicating through the hand signals they had been learning. The kitchen's warmth enveloped them all, creating a sense of camaraderie that had been absent in the scriptorium's studious atmosphere. Here, they worked not with ink and parchment, but with the elements of life itself: grain, water, fire, salt. When Celerarius returned to inspect Matthias's first attempt at shaping a loaf, his expression remained neutral, but he nodded once, the closest thing to approval any novice had received thus far. Matthias felt a disproportionate surge of pride. "Now," Celerius said, "you will learn the most important part." He led Matthias and Adelmar to the massive stone ovens where several monks worked tending fires. Too hot, the bread burns. Too cool, it remains raw. The perfect loaf requires the perfect fire. As the morning progressed, Matthias found himself drawn into the rhythm of the kitchen. The silence no longer felt like a punishment, but rather a form of meditation. His hands learned what his ears and mouth could not: the feel of properly kneaded dough, the sound of a perfectly baked loaf tapped on its bottom, the visual cues of rising yeast. By midday, when the bell rang for sext, the 6th hour prayer, Matthias had helped prepare dozens of loaves, each marked with a cross before baking. They filed out of the kitchen with flour-dusted habits, joining the other monks for prayers before the main meal of the day. The refectory hummed with subtle energy as the brothers took their places on long benches. Prior Augustine sat at the head table with the senior monks, his sharp gaze missing nothing. The 6 silent novices sat together at the far end of a table, conspicuous in their enforced quiet. A monk read aloud from the writings of Saint Benedict as servants' lay brothers who performed much of the abbey's manual labor brought out the midday meal. Simple wooden bowls contained a hearty stew of beans and vegetables, with pieces of fish for protein. Fresh bread, perhaps some that Matthias had helped create, was distributed, along with small cups of watered wine. The sight of the bread filled Matthias with unexpected emotion. This was his work, transformed by fire into nourishment. His hands had participated in an ancient ritual, creating something necessary and good. The revelation was so simple, yet so profound, that he almost forgot his vow of silence to share it with Adelmar, who sat beside him. Instead, he broke his portion of bread and offered half to his fellow novice. Adelmar's eyes widened slightly, in understanding, and he accepted the gesture with a small nod. Something passed between them, communion deeper than words could express. After the meal came a brief period of rest, the only truly free time in the day. Most monks used it for reading, private prayer, or tending to personal needs. The 6 silent novices, however, were directed to the abbey's vineyards, where spring work was well underway. Brother Vintner, who oversaw the famous Cluny wines, greeted them with characteristic enthusiasm. Unlike the austere Prior Augustine or the exacting Celerius, the vintner approached his sacred duty with infectious joy. Ah, the silent ones! Perfect timing, he exclaimed, leading them between rows of carefully tended vines. Today we check for new growth and remove what is dead. No need for words, the vines speak for themselves. The vineyards stretched across a slope, capturing maximum sunlight. Here, generations of monks had perfected the art of winemaking, producing vintages that were traded and treasured throughout Christendom. Under Brother Vintner's guidance, Matthias learned to recognize healthy buds and prune away dead wood. The parallel to spiritual life was obvious, even without explanation, removing what no longer served growth, nurturing what promised new life. As they worked, a commotion arose from the nearby road. A group of travelers approached the abbey gates merchants. By their dress, with heavily laden mules and armed guards. Such arrivals were common at Cluny, which served as both spiritual center and hostelry for those traversing the region. Brother Vintner shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun. Flemish wool merchants, by the look of them. They visit twice yearly. The hospice brothers will be busy tonight. Matthias watched with curiosity as the party was welcomed into the abbey. Even in silence, even in isolation from the world, Cluny remained connected to the currents of commerce and travel that flowed through Christendom. Later, as they returned to the abbey for none the 9th hour prayer, Matthias caught sight of Prior Augustine deep in conversation with one of the merchants. Something in the prior's expression gave Matthias pause attention, a concern that seemed out of character for the usually impassive leader. Augustine glanced up, catching Matthias's gaze. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, or a warning. Then the prior's face resumed its usual inscrutable calm, and he turned away. That brief exchange, wordless yet laden with meaning, lingered in Matthias's mind throughout the afternoon prayers. Something beyond their sheltered world had reached inside Cluny's walls. Something that troubled even the unflappable Prior Augustine. As the day progressed, toward Vespers, the evening prayer, dark clouds gathered on the western horizon. The promise of rain hung in the air, a fitting backdrop to the sense of unease that had settled over Matthias. In just 3 days of silence, he had learned to read meaning in the smallest gestures, the subtlest changes of expression. And what he read now, in the tense shoulders of the senior monks and the hushed conversations that stopped when novices approached, suggested that trouble had arrived at Cluny along with the Flemish merchants. That night, as he prepared for sleep after compline the final prayer, Matthias found a small folded parchment tucked beneath his pillow. Opening it revealed a single line of text in careful script. Not all silence serves God. Some truths must be spoken. The message was unsigned, yet the implication was clear. Someone believed that Matthias and perhaps the other silent novices had been intentionally removed from conversations at a critical moment. But why? And who had taken the risk of breaking their isolation? Sleep eluded him long into the night, his mind turning over possibilities as rain began to patter against the dormitory windows. By the time exhaustion finally claimed him, Matthias had resolved to open his eyes and ears even wider in the days to come. His mouth might be bound by silence, but his other senses would become his voice. Rain continued through the night and into the following day, casting a grey pall over the abbey. The 6 silent novices reported to the infirmary after morning prayers, where Brother Infirmarianer, gentle man with surprisingly delicate hands for his large frame, welcomed them with obvious relief. "Providence sends you when most needed," he said, gesturing toward several occupied beds. 3 of our Flemish guests fell ill during the night. Nothing serious, travel, exhaustion, and perhaps bad water, but they require attention. The infirmary occupied its own building, separated from the main abbey to prevent the spread of disease. Unlike the austere dormitory or the functional kitchen, this space was designed for comfort. Beds with actual mattresses lined the walls, and hearths kept the rooms unusually warm. Herbs hung from ceiling beams, filling the air with medicinal scents: mint, sage, lavender, and less identifiable bitter ones. Matthias was assigned to tend the fire and prepare herbal infusions under the infirmarian's guidance. As he worked, he observed the merchants who had arrived the previous day. 2 were clearly servants, rough-clothed men with weather-beaten faces. The third, however, stood out. Despite his illness, the man carried himself with unmistakable authority. His hands, though temporarily weakened by fever, showed no from manual labor. Most telling was the way the other merchants deferred to him, even in sickness. Brother Infirmarian noticed Matthias's observation. "Yes, that is Master Willem van Gent," he said quietly, "a merchant of considerable influence. In Flanders, Prior Augustine has taken personal interest in his recovery." Matthias nodded understanding while wondering why a wool merchant, even a wealthy one, would warrant the prior's special attention. The mystery of the note beneath his pillow remained foremost in his mind. Throughout the morning, Matthias moved between tasks: stoking fires, delivering tisanes to patients, changing soiled linens. The work was humbling yet oddly satisfying. Unlike the intellectual challenge of the scriptorium or the creative process of bread-making, tending the sick demanded simple compassion. Shortly before midday, as Matthias brought fresh water to Master Willem's bedside, the merchant beckoned him closer. Despite his illness, the Fleming's eyes were alert and assessing. "You are one of the silent ones, yes?" Willem asked in heavily accented Latin. "Good, then you can listen without interrupting." Matthias hesitated, unsure whether to acknowledge the direct address. "Sit," Willem commanded, patting the edge of the bed. "Your Prior Augustine believes you novices are being punished, but silence gives you power. You observe what others miss while they fill the air with noise." Against his better judgment, Matthias perched on the bed's edge. Something in the merchant's intensity compelled attention. "I bring news from Flanders that your prior wishes kept quiet," Willem continued, his voice dropping. "The Emperor Henry has made a proclamation against the authority of Cluny over its daughter houses. He claims church reform has gone too far, that monasteries should answer to local nobility rather than Abbot Hugh. Matthias kept his face carefully neutral, though his heart raced at this confidence. The implications were enormous. Cluny's power stemmed from its network of dependent priories across Europe, all answering directly to the abbot rather than local lords. This independence had allowed the Cluniac reforms to spread, elevating monastic life throughout Christendom. There are rumors, Willem added, glancing toward the door to ensure they remained private, that certain bishops support the emperor bishops who find Cluny's influence ... inconvenient. The merchant S words aligned with the tension Matthias had observed among the senior monks. But why share this information with a novice bound to silence? As if reading his thoughts, Willem smiled thinly. I tell you this because you cannot repeat it. Your eyes show understanding. Remember what you hear. The time may come when it proves useful. Further conversation was prevented by Brother Infirmarian's return. Matthias rose quickly, resuming his duties with outward calm, while his mind whirled with implications. The politics of empire and church rarely touched novices directly, yet here he stood at the periphery of a conflict that could reshape the monastic world. Throughout the afternoon, as rain drummed steadily against the infirmary roof, Matthias continued his observations. Prior Augustine visited briefly, speaking privately with Master Willem before departing with a troubled expression. Several senior monks came and went, their conversations hushed yet urgent. By the time the bell rang for vespers, Matthias had pieced together fragments of a larger picture. Something momentous approached to challenge de Cluny's authority that required immediate response. Yet even as he understood the gravity of the situation, he remained uncertain why he had been made privy to it. The 6 silent novices attended evening prayers together, their presence a reminder of their ongoing penance. As Matthias knelt in the abbey church, the familiar Latin chants washing over him, he noticed Brother Adalbert, the elderly monk who had first alerted him to his mist, matins, watching him with unusual intensity. When prayers concluded, Adalbert approached, gesturing for Matthias to follow. They walked in silence through rain-slicked cloisters to the library. Sacred space, few novices were permitted to enter unescorted. The library's interior caught Matthias's breath despite his preoccupation. Shelves lined the walls, filled with codices and scrolls representing the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Tables with slanted reading surfaces stood in rows, each with a small oil lamp providing focused light. The room smelled of parchment, ink, and the distinctive mustiness of aged leather bindings. Only when they reached a secluded corner did Adalbert finally speak. You met with the Fleming, he stated without preamble. What did he tell you? Matthias hesitated, caught between his vow of silence and the direct question from a senior monk. His hands moved instinctively in the sign language they had been learning, a gesture of confusion and conflict. Adalbert shook his head impatiently. You may speak to me. Prior Augustine has granted dispensation for this conversation alone. Still, Matthias hesitated, uncertain whether to trust this sudden exemption. Your loyalty is commendable, Adalbert acknowledged, but unnecessary. I placed the note beneath your pillow. Now tell me what the merchant shared. That admission decided him. Matthias spoke for the first time in 4 days, his voice scratchy from disuse. Master Willem spoke of Emperor Henry's proclamation against Cluny's authority over its daughter houses. He mentioned bishops who support the emperor's position. Odelbert's S-lined face revealed nothing. And why do you think he shared this with a novice under vow of silence? I do not know, Matthias admitted. Perhaps because I cannot repeat what I heard. Perhaps Odelbert agreed. Or perhaps because Willem van Gent is not merely a wool merchant, but an imperial agent testing which way the winds blow at Cluny. Matthias absorbed this revelation with growing unease. Then his illness... Convenient, is it not? Placing him in our infirmary, where brothers speak freely, believing the sick too miserable to listen. Odelbert moved to a nearby shelf, removing a slim volume bound in red leather. Prior Augustine suspected Willem's true purpose from the moment he arrived. Hence your assignment to the infirmar eyes and ears that would notice what others might miss. Understanding dawned slowly. We were placed there deliberately. Our silence was not merely punishment. The punishment was genuine, Odel said with the ghost of a smile. Your failure to wake without the bell required correction. But Prior Augustine sees opportunity in all circumstances. Your silence made you ideal observers. Matthias struggled to reconcile this information with his perception of the stern, uncompromising prior. Then the prior is aware of Willem's true identity. Indeed, which is why we allowed him exactly the information we wished the emperor to receive. Odelbert handed Matthias the red book. This contains the rule of Saint Benedict in its original form. Studied chapter 7, particularly humility comes in many guises, including apparent severity. As Matthias accepted the precious volume, a new appreciation for Prior Augustine's subtlety replaced his former trepidation. The prior had not merely been testing the novice's devotion, but training them in observation and discernment skills, as valuable to Cluny as scholarship or prayer. What happens now? Matthias asked, echoing his question from that first night when Odelbert had informed him of his missed matter. Now, the elderly monk replied, you return to silence until your week concludes. But you do so understanding that silence serves purpose beyond penance. In the coming conflict between emperor and church, Cluny will need brothers who observe carefully and judge wisely. Odelbert guided him toward the library exit. Remember, brother Matthias, not all battles are fought with swords or even words. Some are won in silence, with patience and strategic thought. As they parted near the dormitory, rain still, falling steadily beyond the cloister walls, Matthias reflected on how dramatically his understanding had shifted in a single day. What had seemed simple, the rigid structure of monastic life, the clear delineation between punishment and reward now, revealed layers of complexity he had never imagined. That night, by the dim light of a single candle allowed for reading, Matthias opened the red book Odelbert had entrusted to him. The words of Saint Benedict, written 5 centuries earlier, seemed to speak directly to his situation. Listen carefully, my son, to the Master's instructions, and attend to them with the ear of your heart. Outside, thunder rumbled across distant hills, nature's counterpoint to the silence that now felt less like constraint and more like opportunity. Tomorrow would bring new duties, new observations, and perhaps new revelations. For now, Matthias embraced the quiet, finding in it not punishment but possibility. The rain ceased overnight, leaving behind a freshly washed world. Sunlight sparkled on wet stone as the silent novices made their way to the scriptorium after morning prayers. 5 days into their week of silence, they moved together with newfound synchronicity, communicating through gestures that had become second nature. Brother Thaddeus greeted them with unexpected warmth. Ah, my silent scribes return. Your hands have proven skilled elsewhere, but today we begin real work. The scriptorium felt different to Matthias now. Not merely a workshop for copying texts, but a battlefield in the struggle Odelbert had described. Here, Cluny preserved and propagated ideas that shaped Christendom, including its own vision of monastic independence. Today, rather than practice alphabets, each novice was assigned a specific task. Brother Clement would prepare parchment, smoothing and priming the sheets. Brother Francis would mix inks of various colors. Brothers Peter and Nicholas would rule lines on pages for a new psalter. Adelmar would copy simple text sprays and common passages. And Matthias, to his surprise, was directed to assist Brother Illuminator with the decorative capitals for an important manuscript. Prior Augustine noted your steady hand, Thaddeus explained, leading him to a corner workstation where an older monk bent over a partially completed page. Brother Gabriel will guide you. Brother Gabriel looked up from his work, assessing Matthias with keen blue eyes. Unlike many of the monks whose expressions were weathered by asceticism, Gabriel's face retained a youthful quality despite his grey hair. "So you are one of the silent ones," he remarked, gesturing for Matthias to sit beside him. "Good. Art requires more observation than conversation." The manuscript before them took Matthias's breath away. Each page featured text in perfect script with intricate, decorated initials in red, blue, and gold leaf. Delicate vines and creatures wound through the margins, not merely decorative, but laden with symbolic meaning. "We are creating a copy of Augustine's City of God," Gabriel explained. "A fitting text for troubled times, would you not agree?" Matthias nodded, recognizing the reference to the political tensions surrounding Cluny. St. Augustine had written his masterwork as the Roman Empire crumbled, exploring the relationship between earthly authority and divine purpose. Precisely the question at stake in Cluny's conflict with the emperor. "Today you will learn to apply gold leaf," Gabriel continued. "Watch carefully." For the next hour, Matthias observed Gabriel's meticulous process, preparing the gesso base, cutting tissue-thin sheets of gold, applying them with a special tool, then burnishing the surface to a brilliant shine. Each step required absolute precision and patience. "Now you try," Gabriel said finally, sliding a practice parchment toward Matthias. "Begin with this letter D, for Deus, of course." Matthias's first attempt was clumsy, the gold leaf tearing and sticking to his fingers, rather than the prepared surface. Gabriel watched without comment as he struggled, offering neither criticism nor assistance. On the third try, Matthias achieved a passable result. Not beautiful, but properly adhered. Gabriel nodded slightly. "Better. Now watch again." This pattern continued throughout the morning demonstration, practice, correction, refinement. By the time the bell rang for midday prayer, Matthias's fingers ached and his eyes burned from concentration, but he had successfully gilded several practice letters. "You have potential," Gabriel acknowledged as they cleaned their workspace. "Tomorrow we shall try color." As they prepared to leave for Sext, Gabriel added casually, "The Fleming departed this morning, I hear, recovered remarkably quickly from his illness." Matthias kept his expression neutral while wondering if Gabriel knew of Willem's true purpose and of Matthias's involvement in the subtle intrigue. The Illuminator's knowing smile suggested he might be yet another player in Prior Augustine's complex strategy. The remainder of the day passed in similar fashion, careful instruction, alternating with periods of independent work. Matthias lost himself in the meditative process of illumination, finding unexpected peace in the precise application of color and form. The scriptorium grew quiet as afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, each monk absorbed in his assigned task. As Vespers approached, Brother Gabriel inspected Matthias's final practice piece of the day, a simple floral border in red and blue. The illuminator studied it with critical attention before offering a slight nod. "Your hand steadies with practice," he observed. "There is something I would show you before prayers." Gabriel led Matthias to a locked cabinet in the corner of the scriptorium. With a small key kept on a cord round his neck, he opened it to reveal several completed manuscripts awaiting binding. He carefully removed one, opening it to a specific page. "Look closely," he instructed, pointing to an illuminated letter R at the beginning of a chapter. "What do you see?" The letter was exquisitely rendered in red and gold, with an intricate vine pattern forming its vertical stroke. Matthias studied it carefully, uncertain what Gabriel wanted him to observe. Then he noticed hidden within the decorative flourishes was a tiny scene, a monk kneeling before a crowned figure who offered a document, so small and cleverly integrated into the design that casual observation would miss it entirely. "We speak even in silence," Gabriel whispered. "For centuries, illuminators have embedded messages in their art commentary too dangerous to express openly. The manuscript may praise a king's generosity with words, while the illumination reveals his true nature." Matthias understood immediately. The illuminations were not merely decorative, but could serve as a form of resistance, preserving truths that censored text could not express. In the growing conflict between Cluny and imperial authority, such subtle communication might prove vital. "Tomorrow," Gabriel promised, "I will teach you how meaning hides in beauty." As the bells called them to vespers, Matthias realized his education at Cluny encompassed far more than prayer and scripture. He was learning a language of symbols and secrets, a visual code that had preserved truth through centuries of political turmoil. On the morning of the 6th day, an unexpected commotion disrupted the abbey's routine. As the silent novices finished lauds and prepared to break their fast, a party of riders arrived at the gates, not merchants this time, but ecclesiastical visitors. Their leader rode a magnificent white palfrey and wore the distinctive red cap of a cardinal. Word spread quickly through whispers and gestures. Cardinal Umberto of Silva Candida, papal legate and close advisor to Pope Leo IX, had arrived unannounced. From Rome, his presence at Cluny, particularly at this moment of tension with imperial authorities, could not be coincidence. Prior Augustine immediately cancelled the novices' scheduled duties, directing all brothers to prepare the abbey for a formal welcome. Even the silent novices were put to work, polishing candlesticks, sweeping floors, and arranging the great hall for an appropriate reception. From his position cleaning the entrance to the chapter house, Matthias observed the Cardinal's entry procession. Umberto was not what he had expected, neither particularly tall nor imposing, with a scholar's slight stoop and thoughtful eyes. Yet his authority was unmistakable in how the senior monks, including the often imperious prior Augustine, deferred to his every gesture. The formal welcome consumed most of the morning, with the entire community gathering to hear the cardinal deliver greetings from the Holy Father. Standing in the back row with the other silent novices, Matthias could barely make out Umberto's words, but his tone conveyed both grave concern and resolute determination. After the welcome, the cardinal disappeared into private conference. With the abbey's leadership, the silent novices were directed to the kitchen, where Brother Celerarius put them to work preparing an elaborate feast befitting such a distinguished visitor. Cardinal Umberto is a man of simple tastes, Celerius informed them as he demonstrated how to properly truss a fowl, but we honor his office with our best. He has defended Cluny's independence from his earliest days at Rome, while Matthias worked alongside Adelmar, plucking herbs from the garden for the feast. He noticed unusual activity throughout the abbey. Messengers arrived and departed at frequent intervals, and senior monks hurried between buildings with uncharacteristic urgency. Something momentous was clearly underway. By midday, as the silent novices helped serve the formal meal in the refectory, snippets of conversation reached Matthias's ears. The cardinal had brought news of imperial envoys heading toward Rome, seeking papal support for greater control over monastic houses throughout the empire. Cluny's unique independence, guaranteed by papal authority, stood directly in their path. As Matthias poured wine into Cardinal Umberto's cup, the papal legate glanced up, studying him with unexpected intensity. "This is one of your silent novices, prior?" he asked Augustine, who sat at his right hand. "Yes, your eminence. Brother Matthias has shown particular aptitude for observation during his penance." "Interesting," Umberto murmured. "Sometimes those who do not speak see most clearly." He addressed Matthias directly. "You serve at the pleasure of God and his church, young brother. Remember that earthly authorities, however grand, hold no dominion over your soul." Matthias bowed in acknowledgement, wondering at the cardinal's pointed remark. Was it merely spiritual guidance, or something more specific, a message to be remembered and perhaps passed on? Throughout the afternoon, as preparations continued for an evening council, Matthias found himself repeatedly in proximity to important conversations. Whether by chance or design, his duties took him to the very places where senior monks and Roman visitors gathered to discuss strategy. While polishing candlesticks outside the abbot's private chamber, he overheard Cardinal Umberto's passionate declaration, "The emperor forgets that Cluny's independence was established not by royal decree but by apostolic authority. What Rome has blessed, no crown may diminish." Later, dusting the library shelves near where several Roman clerics consulted ancient documents, he caught fragmentary references to a document being prepared, something that would affirm Cluny's special relationship with the Holy See. By Vespers, Matthias had pieced together enough to understand the gravity of the situation. The cardinal's visit represented Rome's commitment to preserving Cluny's independence from imperial controller, struggle with implications for monasteries throughout Europe. What remained unclear was his own role in these events. Why had Prior Augustine repeatedly placed him where he could witness these deliberations? The answer came that evening, as the silent novices prepared for sleep. Brother Odelbert approached Matthias with a folded parchment bearing the prior's seal. Opening it, Matthias found a simple instruction: "After matins, come to the scriptorium, bring the red book." Sleep came fitfully that night, his mind filled with questions. When the bell for matins finally rang at 3 a.m, and, yes, there was a bell this night, Matthias rose with both anticipation and trepidation. The abbey was eerily quiet as he made his way from the church to the scriptorium after prayers. The red book of Benedict's rule clutched beneath his habit. A single lamp burned inside, illuminating a small group gathered around one of the larger writing desks. Prior Augustine, Cardinal Umberto, Brother Gabriel, the illuminator, and Brother Librarian. "Enter, Brother Matthias," the prior said without looking up from the document before him. "Your silence ends now, but only within this room. Beyond these walls, your penance continues until tomorrow, Lords. Matthias approached cautiously. You summoned me, Father Prior. Indeed, Cardinal Umberto wishes to employ your observational skills and steady hand for a task of some importance. Augustine gestured toward the papal legate, who studied Matthias with penetrating intensity. Young brother, Umberto said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Prior Augustine tells me you have been learning the art of illumination, and that you understand the messages hidden within such art. I have only begun to learn, Your Eminence. Matthias replied humbly. Humility becomes you, but time presses, the cardinal said. We are preparing a document of great significance, papal privilege confirming Cluny's independence from all temporal authority. The text has been drafted, he indicated, the parchment on the desk, but we require something more, enduring. Brother Gabriel stepped forward. We wish to embed a hidden message within the illuminated initiatia, truth that will survive even if future emperors or anti-popes attempt to suppress or alter the main text. Matthias understood immediately the true relationship between spiritual and temporal authority. Precisely, Cardinal Umberto nodded approvingly. You grasp the essence. Brother Gabriel will guide your hand, but the concept must come from one whose mind is unclouded by politics, a novice whose heart remains pure in intention. Prior Augustine's expression softened slightly. This is why we tested you, Matthias. The missed bell, the enforced silencer, to reveal your character and prepare you for this moment. The realization that his entire penance had been, at least partially, a deliberate preparation for this task left Matthias momentarily speechless. When he found his voice again, he asked simply, What must I do? For the remainder of the night, by lamplight carefully shielded from outside view, Matthias worked alongside Brother Gabriel to design the illuminated initial that would begin the papal privilege. Cardinal Umberto described what must be primacy of spiritual authority, the proper relationship between church and empire, the special protection extended to Cluny, with Gabriel's guidance. Matthias sketched a complex design for the letter P for privilegium that contained hidden within its flourishes a tiny scene depicting Pope Leo handing a shield to Abbot Hugh, while an emperor figure stood respectfully aside, so integrated into the decorative elements that only the most careful observer would recognize its significance. The image nevertheless preserved the essential truth of Cluny's protected status. As dawn approached, the design was complete and approved. The actual illumination would be executed later by Brother Gabriel and his most skilled assistants. But the conception, the vision that would guide their hands, was Matthias's creation. You have served well, Cardinal Umberto said, as they concluded their secret labor. Few will know of your contribution, but God sees what remains hidden from human eyes. Prior Augustine placed a hand on Matthias's shoulder, the first gesture of warmth he had shown any novice. Return to your silence now, brother. When it ends tomorrow, you will begin a new path within our community. As Matthias departed the scriptorium, the first hint of sunrise touched the eastern sky. In just 6 days, his understanding of monastic life had transformed completely. What had once seemed a simple existence of prayer and obedience now revealed itself as something far more complex, delicate balance of spiritual devotion and worldly engagement, of spoken truths and hidden messages, of personal humility and institutional authority. Tomorrow his silence would end, but its lessons would remain. In finding his voice, he had first had to lose it, and in that loss, discover the power of speech when finally restored. The seventh day of silence dawned with golden light streaming through the narrow dormitory windows. For Matthias, exhausted from his nighttime labors in the scriptorium, yet strangely energized, the morning carried a sense of culmination. By tomorrow's Lords his vow of silence would end, though he now understood that true speech began with knowing when to remain quiet. The 6 silent novices attended matins and lauds together, their gestures and expressions revealing varying degrees of anticipation. Brother Francis practically vibrated with eagerness to speak again, while Brother Clement maintained the same stoic demeanor he had shown throughout their penance. Adelmar caught Matthias's eye during prayers, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Clearly he had noticed Matthias' essence during part of the night. After morning prayers, Prior Augustine made an unexpected announcement to the assembled community. Today we welcome visitors from the surrounding villages, families bringing their sons to be considered for admission to our novitiate. As is our custom, they will observe our life, and we shall observe their potential. I ask all brothers to demonstrate the discipline and joy of our vocation. The prospect of visitors, particularly prospective novices and their families, a flurry of activity throughout the abbey. The silent novices were assigned to assist Brother Hospitaller, who oversaw guest accommodations and reception. You 6 will be especially valuable today, the Hospitaller told them as they prepared guest quarters. Your silence will remind our visitors of the self-discipline required in monastic life, while your actions will demonstrate its rewards. By mid-morning, families began to arrive, mostly modest farmers and craftsmen with sons between 12 and 16 years of age. Matthias remembered his own arrival just months earlier. His father's gruff farewell, contrasting with his mother's tears. These boys looked much as he must have, some eager, others apprehensive, a few clearly present only to fulfill parental expectations. One family in particular caught Matthias's attention as he helped distribute bread and watered wine to the visitors gathered in the guest hall. A stonemason and his wife had brought twin sons, both perhaps 14 years old. The boys were identical in appearance, but opposite in demeanor, one animated and curious, the other withdrawn and watchful. As Matthias served them, the more outgoing twin peppered him with questions. Is it true you wake at midnight to pray? Do you really never speak? Are there ghosts in the old parts of the abbey? Each query met only with Matthias's polite smile and slight bow, constrained as he was by his continued silence. The quieter twin, however, simply observed, his eyes reflecting an intelligence that required no constant questioning. When Matthias refilled their cups, this boy nodded thanks with a gesture that mimicked the monastic hand language Matthias had been learning, whether by coincidence or observation. Matthias couldn't tell. Throughout the day, as the prospective novices and their families toured the abbey grounds, Matthias found his attention repeatedly drawn to the quiet twin. Something in the boy's thoughtful gaze reminded him of his own first days at Cluny, the mixture of uncertainty and determination, the hunger for something beyond the physical world. By afternoon, the visitors were invited to observe Vespers, giving them a taste of the abbey's liturgical life. Afterward, the prospective novices were separated from their parents for individual interviews with senior monks, while the silent novices prepared the refectory for the evening meal. As they worked, Brother Francis, always the most restless, under the constraint of silence, made an elaborate series of hand gestures indicating his preference among the candidates. The blacksmith's strapping son, who had demonstrated his strength by helping unload a cart of firewood. Brother Clement indicated his choice for the notary's scholarly offspring, clearly already literate and well-versed in Latin. When it came, Matthias turned to indicate his preference. He hesitated only briefly before making the sign for twins, followed by quiet one. Adelmar nodded vigorous agreement, while brothers Peter and Nicholas exchanged confused glances. The evening meal brought all the community together with their guests for a modest feast. Prior Augustine, in a rare display of warmth, had ordered extra portions of fish and honeyed bread for the visitors, along with undiluted wine. The Abbey Schola Cantorum performed sacred music between courses, demonstrating another aspect of monastic accomplishment. Cardinal Umberto, who had remained largely secluded during the day's activities, made an appearance toward the meal's conclusion. His presence created a noticeable ripple of excitement among the visitors, many of whom had never seen a prince of the church. The cardinal moved among the tables, offering brief words of blessing to each family. When he reached the stonemason's family, he paused longer, engaging them in conversation that Matthias, serving nearby, could partially overhear. "Your sons show promise," Umberto told the parents. "To such fine boys surely you need not give both to the church." The stonemason's weathered face revealed complex emotions. "My trade can support one apprentice, Your Eminence. The other must find his path elsewhere. We had thought perhaps one to the monastery, one to my workshop, but they have never been separated. And what do the young men themselves wish?" the cardinal asked, directing his question to the twins. The outgoing twin spoke first. "As expected, I would like to try both, if possible, Your Eminence. Perhaps I could divide my time between one cannot serve two masters," Umberto interrupted gently. "The monastic life demands complete commitment." He turned to the quieter brother. "And you?" The boy met the cardinal's gaze steadily. "I wish to learn, Your Eminence. Here there are books and knowledge my father cannot provide, yet I would not abandon my brother." Umberto nodded thoughtfully. Loyalty and wisdom, valuable traits indeed. He glanced up, catching Matthias's eye as he listened nearby. Perhaps Brother Matthias might share his experience tomorrow when his silence ends. With that cryptic suggestion, the cardinal moved on, leaving Matthias startled at being directly referenced. How had Umberto known his name, and that his penance concluded tomorrow? The cardinal clearly kept himself well informed about even the most junior members of the community. As the evening concluded and the visitors retired to the guest quarters for the night, Prior Augustine summoned the 6 silent novices to the chapter house. There, to their surprise, they found Cardinal Umberto waiting alongside several senior monks. "Your week of silence concludes at tomorrow's Lord's," the prior announced. "Tonight, Cardinal Umberto wishes to speak with you, though you may not yet respond." The papal legate studied them thoughtfully before addressing them in his measured voice. "Silence has been your teacher this week, young brothers. Before you reclaim your voices, consider what you have learned in its He paced slowly before them, hands clasped behind his back. The church faces challenges from those who mistake worldly power for divine authority. In the coming struggle, Cluny must stand firm as a beacon of true spiritual independence. Yet we must also engage with the world, not retreat from it. Stopping before Francis, he continued, "Some of you will serve through strength, moving to Clement, others through scholarship, to Peter and Nicholas, some through humble daily labor." Finally, he stood before Adelmar and Matthias, and some through observation and discernment, seeing what others miss and preserving what others would destroy. Tomorrow you will speak again, Umberto concluded, addressing them all. Choose your words with the care you have learned in silence. Remember that speech is a privilege granted by God for truth-telling, not idle chatter or self-glorification. With that, they were dismissed to prepare for Camplin their final prayer before a night that would end their week of penance. As they walked together toward the church, Matthias felt a strange reluctance to reach this long-awaited moment. Silence had indeed been a teacher, revealing depths to monastic life and to himself that he might never have discovered otherwise. Later, as they prepared for sleep and the dormitory gradually quieted, Adelmar approached Matthias Escat, a questioning expression on his face. Using the hand language they had perfected during their week together, he asked simply, "Secret work?" Matthias hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal even in silent communication. Finally, he responded with the signs for important document and protection for Cluny. Adelmar's eyes widened slightly, but he simply nodded, understanding. Whatever divisions might exist among the senior monks regarding imperial politics, among the novices there existed a simpler loyalty to their chosen home. If Matthias had been tasked with helping protect Clunia's independence, that was explanation enough. Sleep came eventually, though Matthias's mind continued to churn with all he had experienced and learned during his week of silence. Dreams came in fragments illuminated manuscripts where the decorations moved and shifted. Master Willem speaking in riddles. The quiet twin standing at a crossroads between two identical paths. The midnight bell for matins woke him from these troubled visions. This time he rose immediately, fully alert. No one would miss prayers on this significant night. The cold, dark church echoed with familiar chants as the brothers marked the hours between midnight and dawn. Matthias found comfort in the ancient rhythms, the words that had sustained generations of monks through wars, plagues, and political upheavals. Whatever changes came to Cluny, whatever challenges the emperor might present, these prayers would continue. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness, the eastern sky gradually lightening from black to deep blue to pale gold. As the community gathered for Lord's the morning prayer that would mark the official end of the novices, Penance Matthias felt a strange mixture of anticipation and nostalgia. Words would soon be his to use again, yet something precious would be lost with the breaking of silence. Prior Augustine addressed the assembled monks before prayers began, his austere face revealing unusual emotion. Brothers, today 6 among us return to full participation in our communal life. Their penance concludes with this morning's prayers. He turned to where the silent novices knelt together. Rise, brothers Francis, Clement, Peter, Nicholas, Adelmar, and Matthias. Your silence has taught humility and observation. Now let your voices join ours in praise of God. As they stood, Cardinal Umberto stepped forward unexpectedly. If I may, Prior Augustine. At the prior's nod, he continued, before these young brothers speak again, I would offer a blessing on behalf of our Holy Father. The cardinal approached the 6 novices, making the sign of the cross over each one. When he reached Matthias, their eyes met briefly, and Umberto spoke so softly that only Matthias could hear. Remember always that the Church's strength lies not in proclamations or displays of power, but in quiet persistence and hidden truth. Then Lords began, the familiar Latin phrases rising toward the vaulted ceiling. When the moment came for the responsorial psalm, Matthias opened his mouth and joined his voice with the community for the first time in 7 days. The simple act of speech of participation felt almost overwhelming after so long in silence. His voice cracked slightly on the first words, then strengthened as the prayer continued. Around him, the other formerly silent novices experienced similar moments of adjustment, their voices standing out briefly before blending into the communal chant. As prayers concluded and the monks filed out for the morning meal, Matthias felt a hand on his shoulder. Brother Gabriel, the illuminator, smiled at him with unusual warmth. "Your voice returns just as your hand proves its worth," he said. "Come to the scriptorium after you break your fast. The real work of your illumination begins today." For Matthias, those simple words crystallized all he had learned during his week of silence. The monastery was not merely a place of prayer and contemplation removed from worldly concerns. It stood at the intersection of spiritual and temporal realms, preserving knowledge, speaking truth to power, and concealing wisdom within beauty when direct speech proved dangerous. His voice had returned, but now he understood when to use Itand, when silence might serve a higher purpose. The morning after the breaking of silence brought a strange new reality for Matthias. Words now came freely to his lips, yet he found himself choosing them with greater care than before his penance. The other formerly silent novices showed similar transformations. Any Brother Francis, whose natural exuberance had made silence particularly challenging, now spoke with more measured consideration. Following Gabriel's instruction, Matthias reported to the scriptorium after the morning meal. There he found not only the illuminator, but also Prior Augustine, Cardinal Umberto, and Brother Odelbert gathered around a large table where the draft of the papal privilege lay. "Ah, Brother Matthias," the cardinal greeted him. "Your voice has returned just in time for important discussions." Matthias bowed respectfully. "I am honored to serve, Your Eminence." "As well you should be," Prior Augustine said, though his typically stern tone carried a hint of approval. Few novices are entrusted with matters of such significance. The parchment before them contained the formal text of the privilege, elegant Latin phrases affirming Cluny's special relationship with the Holy See and its independence from imperial control. At the top of the document, a space had been reserved for the illuminated P that Matthias had helped design during the night vigil. "Brother Gabriel will execute the illumination based on your design," Umberto explained. "When completed, this document returns with me to Rome for the Holy Father's seal. But that is not why we have summoned you this morning." Brother Adelbert stepped forward, producing a second parchment, less formal, but bearing the abbey's seal. "This concerns another matter, entirely one touching your future at Cluny." Matthias accepted the document with a questioning glance. Opening it revealed a formal invitation to join the abbey's small corps of illuminators, not after years of general service, as was customary, but immediately. "Your hand shows unusual promise," Brother Gabriel explained, "and recent events have demonstrated your discretion and understanding of our work as deeper purpose." The offer stunned Matthias. Most novices spent years in general service before being assigned a specialized role within the community. To be offered such a position now, barely months into his novitiate, was unprecedented. "I am grateful," he managed finally, "but surely others are more deserving. Brother Adelmar has shown equal aptitude." "Brother Adelmar has his own path," Prior Augustine interrupted, "one which will be revealed to him in due course. Today we discuss yours." Cardinal Umberto studied Matthias with keen interest. "You hesitate. Speak freely, your voice has been returned to you for honest expression." Emboldened by this permission, Matthias chose his words carefully. The honor is immense and unexpected. I came to Cluny seeking knowledge, which this role would surely provide. Yet, in my week of silence, I have glimpsed how the abbey serves, not only through prayer and scholarship, but also through engagement with the world beyond our walls. I wonder if I might better serve in ways that unite these purposes. A smile flickered across Umberto's face. Well answered. Prior Augustine, it seems your instruction in observation has yielded a perceptive pupil. Indeed, the prior's austere expression softened slightly, which brings us to the second matter at hand. Brother Odelbart produced yet another document, this one bearing not Cluny's seal but the papal arms. His Eminence proposes an alternative path, should you wish to consider it. With growing bewilderment, Matthias accepted this new parchment. Its contents caused him to look up in shock. A position in the papal chancery, in Rome as an assistant to my personal secretary, Cardinal Umberto confirmed. Your skills in observation and discretion, combined with your aptitude for visual communication, would serve the Holy See well in these troubled times. The implications overwhelmed Matthias. Leave Cluny, travel to Rome, serve directly in papal administration. The proposal was beyond anything he could have imagined when he arrived as a simple farmer. Son seeking literacy and a quiet life of devotion. You need not decide immediately, Prior Augustine said, with unusual gentleness. Both paths serve God and the Church, though in different ways. Pray for guidance, and give us your answer before Cardinal Umberto departs 3 days hence. Dismissed from this extraordinary meeting, Matthias wandered in a daze through the morning's activities. During the work period, he found himself assigned to the gardens with Brother Clement, who would also return to speech after their shared penance. You seem troubled, Clement observed as they turned spring soil for planting. Has the return of speech brought difficult choices? Matthias hesitated, uncertain how much to share of the morning's events. I have been offered to paths, he said finally, both honorable, both unexpected. I do not know which to choose. Clement nodded thoughtfully, his methodical movements never pausing. When I came to Cluny, I fled a marriage arranged by my father to a woman I had never met. I sought escape in monastic life. He smiled slightly. Now I find peace in simple labor and prayer, the very routine I once feared would imprison me. The confidence surprised Matthias. During their week of silence, Clement had seemed the most naturally adapted to quiet contemplation. You do not regret your choice. I regret my reasons, Clement replied. I came fleeing something, not seeking something. You have the opportunity to make a more positive choice. The insight resonated deeply. Was Matthias choosing between illumination and papal service based on what each offered, or what each might help him avoid? Throughout the day, similar conversations arose with the other former silent novices. Brother Francis envied the excitement of Rome, but admitted he could never leave Cluny's stability. Brothers Peter and Nicholas, inseparable friends, counseled, choosing the path that allowed closer service to God rather than men. Only Adelmar's perspective truly surprised him. As they walked together to Vespers, Matthias finally shared the full details of both offers. Rome, Adelmar exclaimed, eyes wide. The center of Christendom. What an opportunity. Then, seeing Matthias's expression, he added more carefully, though Cluny has its own importance, of course, you would choose Rome. Matthias, asked Adelmar, considered this seriously. I would choose the path leading outward rather than inward. but that reflects my nature, not yours. Where do you find God most clearly, Matthias? In beauty, as creation, or in worldly engagement? The question haunted Matthias through Vespers and the evening meal, following him into the night. After Compline, unable to find peace in the dormitory, he sought the quiet of the abbey church. The vast space, dimly lit by a few perpetual lamps, offered solitude for contemplation. Kneeling before the altar, Matthias struggled to articulate his prayer. Lord, I came to Cluny seeking knowledge and peace. Now I am offered both, but in such different forms. Which serves you better? Which fulfills the purpose for which you brought me here? Lost in prayer, he did not notice the approach of another person until a gentle hand touched his shoulder. Looking up, he found himself gazing into the weathered face of an ancient monk he had never seen before. Brother so elderly that his white beard reached nearly to his waist, his back bent with decades of prayer and labor. Forgive me, brother, Matthias said, startled. I did not mean to disturb your prayers. The old monk smiled, teeth surprisingly strong for one of such advanced age. It is you whose prayers are disturbed by doubt, young brother, I heard. Your question asked of God, but perhaps answerable by man. Uncertain whether to accept this intervention as divine guidance or merely happenstance, Matthias nevertheless found himself explaining the choice he faced. The elderly monk listened without interruption, nodding occasionally as if confirming details already known. Two worthy paths, he said when Matthias concluded, each with its purpose in God's design, yet only one will bring you peace. But which? Matthias asked, desperate for clear direction. The old monk's eyes twinkled in the lamplight. That I cannot tell you, but perhaps I can help you discover it yourself. He lowered himself with surprising grace to sit on the stone floor beside Matthias. Close your eyes, young brother. Imagine yourself 1 year from today, working in the scriptorium here at Cluny. See the parchment before you, the quill in your hand, the colors waiting to be applied. Feel the silence of concentration, the satisfaction of creation. Are you at peace? Matthias obeyed, allowing the scene to form in his mind. He saw sunlight streaming through scriptorium windows, illuminating his work in intricate, capital letter housing symbols only the discerning would recognize. He felt the familiar weight of the quill, smelled the distinctive scent of ink and parchment. The scene brought comfort, familiarity, a sense of belonging. Now, the old monk continued, imagine yourself in Rome, in the papal chancery. See the documents requiring your attention, the messengers coming and going with news from across Christendom. Feel the weight of decisions affecting the Church universal. Are you at peace there? This second vision came less easily, built more from imagination than experience. Matthias saw himself in rich surroundings, engaged in important conversations, traveling perhaps to distant lands on papal business. The scene offered excitement, influence, a broader understanding of the world, but also complexity and conflict that seemed foreign to his nature. You begin to see, the elderly monk observed, watching Matthias's face. But there is one more vision to consider. Open your eyes. When Matthias complied, he found the old monk holding something that had been concealed in the folds of his habit, the small wooden cross Matthias's mother had given him before he left home, the one possession he had been permitted to keep. How did you, Matthias began. Imagine yourself neither at Cluny nor Rome, the monk interrupted gently. Imagine instead returning to your village, to your family, teaching what you have learned to those who have never seen a written word, bringing Christ's light too. corners where it flickers dimly, would peace find you there? This third vision formed with surprising clarity the familiar fields of home, but seen through changed eyes. Matthias imagined establishing a small school, teaching village children to read, to understand scripture, to see beyond the narrow horizons of rural life. The vision brought an unexpected warmth, a sense of purpose that differed from both the artistry of illumination and the politics of papal service. I had not considered this path, Matthias admitted, surprised by his own reaction. The old monk nodded sagely. Few novices do. They see only the walls that enclose them, or the distant roads that might carry them to importance. They forget the places from which they came, the souls who dwell there still in need of light. He pressed the wooden cross into Matthias's palm. This represents not only your faith, but your roots, the soil from which you grew. Neither Rome nor Cluny can claim your soul if God has planted it elsewhere. Are you suggesting I should leave the monastery? Matthias asked, bewildered by this unexpected counsel. The ancient brother chuckled softly. I suggest nothing. I merely offer visions for your consideration. The choice remains yours, as it should. He rose with surprising agility for one so aged. Remember only that God, as purpose often reveals itself in unexpected places. The grandest cathedral and the humblest village church house the same Christ. With that enigmatic statement, the elderly monk shuffled away into the shadows of the church, leaving Matthias clutching his mother's cross and pondering three paths where before he had seen only two. Morning brought renewed clarity as Matthias attended matins and lauds with the community. During breakfast, an unexpected commotion at the refectory entrance drew all eyes. The stonemason and his twin sons had arrived early, before their scheduled departure with the other visiting families. Prior Augustine rose from the head table to address them. Master Raymond, you return promptly. Have you and your sons reached a decision regarding their future? The stonemason looked troubled. That is why we come, Prior. My sons have spent the night in prayer and discussion, and they present me with an unexpected proposal. The quiet twin, the one who had caught Matthias's attention, stepped forward. Reverend Prior, with your permission. At Augustine's nod, he continued, his voice surprisingly steady for one so young, addressing such an imposing figure. My brother and I have always shared one mind in two bodies. To separate us would diminish both. Yet our father cannot support two apprentices, and the monastery cannot accept half a vocation. His more outgoing twin joined him. We propose instead that I apprentice with our father while my brother studies here at Cluny. But he raised a hand as Prior Augustine began to respond, not as a monk, rather as a scholar who might return to our village regularly, bringing knowledge to those who cannot come to it. The quiet twin nodded. I would learn to read, to write, to understand God's word, then share this learning with our community. Our village has no school, no access to scripture except through occasional visits from traveling priests. If Cluny truly seeks to spread enlightenment, might it not benefit more souls through such an arrangement? A murmur spread through the refectory. Such an unorthodox proposal, neither full monastic commitment nor complete separation from Cluny had no clear precedent. Prior Augustine's brow furrowed. This ... is most unusual. Cluny is not a school for secular students. Yet perhaps it should be, interjected Cardinal Umberto, who had watched the exchange with evident interest. The church faces ignorance and superstition beyond monastery walls. Might not such messengers of learning serve God's purpose? The cardinal's support shifted the conversation's tenor immediately. Prior Augustine nodded slowly. The matter deserves consideration. Master Raymond, if you and your sons would join us in the chapter house after the meal, we shall discuss the possibility. As the visitors were escorted to wait outside, normal activities resumed. Yet Matthias found himself unable to focus on his food, the twins' proposal echoing his own midnight contemplation. When Brother Adalbert appeared at his shoulder with a summons from the prior, he felt a strange anticipation. In the chapter house, he found an unexpected gathering: Prior Augustine, Cardinal Umberto, the stonemason's family, and several senior monks, including Brother Gabriel and Brother Librarian. "Ah, Brother Matthias," the prior greeted him. "Your insight may prove valuable in this discussion. These young men propose an arrangement without precedent at Cluny 1, combining monastic learning with secular service." To Matthias's surprise, all eyes turned to him expectantly. "You wish my opinion, Father Prior?" "Indeed," Cardinal Umberto confirmed. "Your own contemplation of different paths serves this moment. What say you to their proposal?" Matthias considered carefully, aware of the weight this moment carried not only for the twins, but potentially for his own future. The rule of Saint Benedict guides our lives within these walls. He began slowly, yet Saint Benedict himself sought first to bring spiritual enlightenment to those living in darkness. If these brothers propose to extend Cluny's light beyond our walls, one through craft, one through learning, might this not fulfill our greater purpose? He turned to the quiet twin. "You do not seek the comforts of monastic life while avoiding its disciplines?" "No, brother," the boy replied earnestly. "I would submit to all Cluny's rules while here prayer, work, study, obedience. I ask only permission to carry what I learn back to those who have no access to such treasures." Matthias nodded, finding unexpected resonance with the boy's vision. "In my week of silence, I have learned that Cluny's strength lies not merely in what we preserve within these walls, but in what we offer to a world in need of truth. Perhaps this proposal, unusual though it is, offers a new avenue for that mission." Cardinal Umberto's eyes gleamed with approval. "Well reasoned, Brother Matthias. Prior Augustine, I believe this merits serious consideration and, perhaps, expansion. Might Cluny establish a formal program for such village scholars? Not full monks, but educated messengers carrying learning to places where ignorance now reigns." The discussion continued for another hour, expanding from the twins' specific case to broader possibilities. By its conclusion, a framework had been established for a new category of Cluniac affiliations: scholar messengers who would learn at the abbey but serve beyond its walls, strengthening the church's presence in rural communities while extending Cluny's influence into areas previously unreached. As the meeting adjourned, Prior Augustine detained Matthias. "You spoke with wisdom beyond your experience," he observed. "Have you reached a decision regarding your own path?" Matthias took a deep breath. "I believe I have, Father Prior. The Illuminator's path offers beauty and preservation of truth. The papal chancery offers influence in worldly affairs. But I find myself drawn to a third path, one similar to what these twins propose." "You wish to return to your village?" Augustine asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Not immediately," Matthias clarified. "I have much to learn: first illumination from Brother Gabriel, administrative skills from yourself and the other seniors, the full depth of scripture from Brother Librarian. but eventually Yesai would carry these skills back to places that hunger for them. Cardinal Umberto, who had lingered nearby, joined the conversation. An interesting choice, Brother Matthias. You would forego both the security of Cluny and the prestige of Rome for an uncertain mission to the margins. Not forego, Your Eminence, but transform. The skills learned here would serve there. The connections established, perhaps even with Rome, would support this work. Matthias smiled slightly. As you yourself observed, the Church faces challenges from ignorance as much as from imperial power. Prior Augustine's typically stern expression eased into something approaching respect. This is not the path I would have chosen for you, Brother Matthias. Yet I cannot deny its alignment with Cluny's deeper purpose. He glanced at Cardinal Umberto. With Your Eminence's support, perhaps we might establish such a mission formally with Brother Matthias as its first fully trained representative after suitable preparation. The Cardinal nodded thoughtfully. The Holy Father speaks often of bringing light to dark corners of Christendom. Such a mission combining Cluniac learning with direct service to common people might serve as a model for the Church Universal. He placed a hand on Matthias's shoulder. 3 years of formation here, under Prior Augustine's guidance and with specialized training in illumination, administration, and teaching. Then, with papal blessing, you shall establish this new path. Thus was born, in that moment of unexpected convergence, a new dimension to Cluny's mission, one that would eventually spread scriptural knowledge, artistic beauty, and administrative order to villages throughout France and beyond. The seed, planted by the stonemason's twins and watered by Matthias's vision, would grow into a network of rural schools and chapels, each maintaining connection to Cluny while serving those who would never pass through its gates. As the bells rang for none the 9th hour, Prayer Matthias joined the community with a heart lightened by clarity. The week of silence had taught him to observe and discern. The return of speech now allowed him to articulate a vision that might never have formed without that penance. What had begun as punishment had transformed into purpose. That evening, as the community gathered for Vespers, Prior Augustine made a formal announcement of the new initiatives, both the acceptance of the quiet twin as Cluny's first village, scholar in training, and the establishment of a more comprehensive mission to be developed under Cardinal Umberto's patronage, with Matthias designated for special preparation to eventually lead this work. Brother Gabriel, upon hearing of Matthias' decision, showed neither disappointment nor surprise. The greatest illumination, he remarked, occurs not on parchment, but in human hearts. You will still learn our art, but to carry its beauty where few have glimpsed such wonders. This too serves truth. As the day concluded with Complan, the final prayer before sleep, Matthias found himself filled with unexpected peace. The path ahead would require patience, diligence, and courage. 3 years of intensive preparation would test his resolve and develop skills he had not yet imagined. The mission itself would face resistance from those comfortable with ignorance or threatened by enlightenment. Yet as he knelt in prayer, the small wooden cross from home clutched in his palm, Matthias understood that his journey had come full circle. He had arrived at Cluny seeking knowledge for himself. He would eventually depart, bringing knowledge to others. The silence that had seemed punishment had revealed a calling. The choices that had seemed conflicting had harmonized into purpose. Outside the abbey walls, stars illuminated the spring night, countless points of light transforming darkness into beauty. Within Matthias's heart, a similar illumination had occurred, the recognition that sometimes the most significant journeys lead not to centers of power or bastions of learning, but to humble places where truth must be planted seed by careful seed. The midnight bell would soon call them to matins at first prayer he had missed, initiating his week of silence. This time, Matthias would rise without prompting, not from fear of punishment, but from embrace of purpose. The rhythm of life, prayer, work, study, rest would continue shaping his days. But now each hour carried new meaning, each lesson connected to future sharing, each skill acquired for eventual distribution. In the dormitory's quiet darkness, as his brothers drifted toward sleep around him, Matthias whispered a prayer of gratitude for silence that had taught him to truly speak, for limitation that had revealed boundless possibility, for a simple, missed bell that had awakened him to his true calling. Epilogon, 3 years later. The summer sun beat down on the dusty road as brother Matthias guided his small donkey cart over the final hill. Below, nestled among ripening fields, lay his childhood village unchanged, yet utterly transformed by the perspective of years and experience. Smoke rose from familiar cottages, children played near the central well, and in the distance, the small village church bell tower gleamed with recent repairs. Beside him, on the cart bench, sat Thomas, the quiet twin, no longer a boy but a young man of 17, now fully trained as Cluny's first official village scholar. Behind them, the cart carried precious cargo, books, writing materials, and teaching tools for the village school they had established during previous visits. "Nervous?" Matthias asked, noting Thomas's tense posture. The young man smiled slightly. "Always, brother Matthias. It never grows easier, bringing new knowledge to old places." "Nor should it," Matthias replied. "What we carry changes, lives sometimes in ways that create resistance." 3 years had passed since the week of silence that had altered Matthias's path. 3 years of intensive preparation at Cluny, learning not only the illuminator's art from Brother Gabriel, but also teaching methods from Brother Librarian, administrative skills from Prior Augustine, and diplomatic approaches from Cardinal Umberto during his periodic visits. Now, at 23, Matthias held an unprecedented position, neither fully monk nor fully secular, but a dedicated bridge between Cluny's learning and the world's need. 6 similar scholar messengers had followed his path, each assigned to different regions. Their network, blessed by both the abbot of Cluny and the Pope himself, had already established 14 village schools, where children and adults alike learned to read scripture, understand church teachings, and connect to the broader Christian world. As their cart approached the village, familiar faces appeared in doorways and garden plots. Some called greetings, others simply stared with the mixture of respect and wariness that Matthias had learned to expect. Not everyone welcomed enlightenment. Change always threatened those invested in maintaining traditional patterns. The small church at the village edge had been there first. Project restored and expanded to include a classroom where Thomas would teach daily while Matthias continued his circuit of regional villages. The priest, initially suspicious of their mission, had gradually become their strongest advocate as he witnessed how scriptural literacy strengthened his parishioners' faith. "Brother Matthias," a woman's voice called from a nearby cottage. His mother emerged, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron, her face alight with joy at her son's return. Though he visited regularly, each reunion carried special sweetness. As she embraced him, Matthias reflected on how differently his life had unfolded from what either of them had imagined when his father first arranged his entry to Cluny. Instead of disappearing forever behind monastery walls, he had returned bringing gifts of knowledge and connection. His father, initially disappointed by his unconventional path, had gradually recognized its values, especially when Matthias's Cluniac connections helped secure favorable prices for the farm's produce. "Thomas, you have grown taller still," his mother exclaimed, embracing the young scholar as well. "Come inside, both of you. Fresh bread awaits, and many have gathered to welcome your return." Inside the expanded cottagan, other fruit of Matthias's work, as his family now hosted visiting scholars and church officials, a small crowd had indeed assembled. The village headman, several elders, parents of schoolchildren, and most surprisingly, Brother Odelbert from Cluny, whose presence indicated news of importance. After greetings and breaking bread together, Brother Odelbert revealed the purpose of his unexpected appearance. Cardinal Umberto sends specific instructions. He informed Matthias privately as the general conversation flowed around them. "Your success here has drawn attention from the highest quarters. The Holy Father wishes to expand this model throughout Christendom." Matthias absorbed this news with measured calm, having learned that grand visions often encountered practical challenges. "Our work proceeds slowly for good reason, Brother Odelbert. Each village has unique needs and resistances. Expansion requires careful discernment." The elderly monk smiled approvingly. "Precisely why the Cardinal values your approach. You are summoned to Rome next spring not to be redirected, but to help shape a wider mission under papal protection. The implications of this development would require careful consideration." For now, however, Matthias's focus remained on the immediate work: the village children who would gather tomorrow for lessons, the adults who would come in the evenings to learn basic letters, the illuminated scripture pages he would create to adorn the small church. Later that evening, as sunset painted the western sky in hues that would have challenged even Brother Gabriel's palate, Matthias walked alone to a hilltop overlooking both village and distant horizon. From his satchel, he withdrew to treasures his Mother's wooden cross, now worn smooth from years of handling, and a small illuminated manuscript he had created during his final months at Cluny. The manuscript contained the story of his journey from missed Matins Bell to discovered purpose, rendered in words and images that conveyed both narrative and deeper truths. Brother Gabriel had called it his masterwork, worthy of Cluny's library. Yet Matthias had chosen to carry it with him instead, a reminder of how silence had taught him to speak and limitation had revealed his freedom. Opening it now to its final illumination, he traced the intricate design with a gentle finger. The image showed a monk standing at a crossroads, one path leading to a grand cathedral, another to a stately palace, and a third to a humble village. Above all three paths, the same sun shone with equal brilliance. 3 years earlier, faced with choosing between Cluny's scriptorium and the papal chancery, Matthias had discovered the third path, not a compromise but a synthesis, carrying the best of both worlds to places that had access to neither. What had seemed a moment of renunciation had become instead a moment of integration, bringing together elements of artistry, scholarship, administration, and direct service. As darkness gradually claimed the landscape, Matthias closed the manuscript and returned it to his satchel. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, new opportunities to translate Cluny's ancient wisdom into forms accessible to simple people. The summons to Rome suggested even broader horizons ahead, perhaps carrying this model to villages throughout Europe, establishing a network of learning that might gradually transform Christendom from its grassroots rather than its power centers. For now, however, it was enough to be here present at the intersection of monastery and village, of learning and application, of preservation and innovation, The bells of the small church rang for evening prayer, their sound carrying clearly across fields ripe for harvest. Matthias rose, turning toward the village with a sense of homecoming deeper than mere physical return. The path that had begun with a missed bell in the midnight darkness now stretched before him into a future bright with purpose, illuminated not only by the artistic skills he had acquired, but by the deeper understanding that true enlightenment belonged neither behind monastery walls nor in centers of power, but in the daily lives of ordinary people seeking truth. He walked down the hill toward evening prayers, carrying Clunia's light into the growing darkness, one small flame among many, yet sufficient to guide the way home. End.